key part of smart grid solutions are the networks. And Ron mentioned that this is a trend to networks with multi-purpose. And multi-purpose is one term. I'll also use the term multi-tenant. And by that I mean, as opposed to traditional utility communication networks, which may be for protection or distribution automation, we're going to see, and we are seeing, communication networks that have multiple applications riding on top of them. Smart metering plus distribution automation, transformer monitoring, and each of these solutions not only have a different purpose, but they have a different user within the utility community. And so as opposed to just one particular department using a specific telecommunication network, you may have multiple departments throughout the utility that are dependent on that network to deliver information at a variety of different needs and service quality levels. And so utilities have to be poised to essentially operate like communication providers. So there needs to be somebody in the utility that isn't just maintaining that telecommunication network, but actually has a traditional telecommunication provider mentality that's delivering services to different users within the utility at different service levels, and are treating them as true clients of that telecommunication network. And we see this as a significant challenge for a lot of utilities because it's not just a different mindset, but in a lot of cases they don't have the organizational structure or the capabilities to make that rapid change. Ron talked a bit about that data explosion. And this is kind of a similar looking graphic, but I'm going to look at it from a slightly different perspective. We've heard a lot in the industry about big data, data migration, analytics on top of the data, the ability to answer a lot of questions that we couldn't before because now we have all this data. I look at it from a kind of a different perspective in that the data really is pretty meaningless if we don't know the business questions that we're trying to answer that we're using the data for. So just having a significant explosion in data doesn't really bring us any value if we don't know the questions that we need to ask. And so this is where the utilities need to develop a methodology, processes, resources around helping internal utility clients access the data and actually ask the business questions that's going to drive change. And so it's really going along that curve is it's not just about the data. It's not about just turning the data information, but it's using that information then to ask the business questions that drive them to new frontiers, that point of wisdom, if you will. And so what I think we're seeing in the industry is the realization that utilities are really struggling with how to manage all of the data, and the realization that it's going to require structural and organizational changes and a different perspective to enable the data to be used and accessed by the different business users. So I mentioned a little bit on a couple of the slides about the organizational impact. Smart metering especially, we've always looked at as being a foundational solution to the smart grid. If you looked at a lot of the kind of original graphics or perspectives, kind of the famous EPRI view of smart grid, AMI was a foundational solution. What we need to do now is, now that the industry has got a certain maturity in these solutions, is we really need them to be foundational. A lot of the solutions in the marketplace, while they're envisioned as foundational, kind of haven't gotten beyond their initial charge. So the challenge then is to figure out how we can leverage these solutions. And in a lot of cases, it requires some organizational redesign. We need to deal with the evolution of the interplay between the IT organization and the OT needs within the utility. And different utilities have taken a different tact to the role of IT, who kind of owns technology, if you will. And then I've mentioned the multi-purpose aspects of the networks really challenge the IT organization from a sustaining operations perspective. So one of the things we've seen in the industry is a more determined attention at asset management. Asset management as a discipline that traditionally is looking at the utility assets such as cable poles, transformers, things like that. I would offer that all of these advanced applications and solutions also need to be treated like an asset. Applications have a life cycle. They have replacement needs. They require care and feeding. So whether it's a telecommunication network or a new distribution management system, all of those need to be treated more like traditional utility assets with an asset management perspective than just point solutions that are care and maintained by a particular group within the utility. Just a couple pieces that I want to share from an industry study that Black & Veatch does every year, and in the latest study, a couple specific questions I pulled out that I think are relevant. One is, is where the utilities looking at expanding or focusing their investments around distribution automation. And you see there continues a focus on advanced metering, demand response, distributed generation, really where we've been focused the last few years, as well as significant expansion around the fault location isolation components of distribution management systems and volt bar CVR type programs. Those are specifically of interesting programs in that they deliver direct value to consumers while also transforming the information the utility has to allow it to operate. And we see a continuing trend in this area. And looking at the challenges for integrating these solutions, though, and this kind of gets to part of the heart of, I guess, my message, is it really is about how to integrate these solutions into the utility. It's modifying the legacy systems that were never designed to accept information or provide information to these new systems the way we need them to do. It's also modifying the business processes the utility has to use the new systems. If we implement new technology into the utility and we don't change the way we do business, we're not going to get the benefits that we envision, and we're going to go back to doing essentially the same thing with a more expensive application. And so we have to change the way we do business. And then the data being the key part. And my mantra that it really isn't about the data, it's about the business questions that we're trying to answer from the data. And then lastly, and energy storage came up a couple times, there's a lot of new technologies that are required to integrate renewables into the grid. Energy storage is the potential of both a disruptive technology, but also an enabling technology, enabling more higher penetration of renewables where we can use energy storage to offset the transient characteristics of those renewables. In order to have visibility into those renewables, the utility needs to have more insight in what's going on, higher penetration of distribution automation, sensors, things like that, if not direct control of those distributed generation sources.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
That was Kevin Cornish of Black & Veatch as we discuss how to future-proof your utility. This is a Smart Grid News webinar, and I'm Jesse Burst, your moderator today. We're going to answer a couple questions now. We've got an interesting one from Andy who asks, Kevin, do you see DMS vendors, distribution management systems, updating their systems to better handle distributed energy resources, or do you see new entrants building separate distributed energy resource management systems? And do you have any bets on the winners or losers of those kind of approaches?
I think both will occur. We're seeing distribution management system vendors, as well as some of the energy management system vendors, improve their applications to handle larger volumes of devices. We also see some standalone systems. To me, it makes sense to integrate those capabilities into the distribution management system to provide the operations folks with single applications to manage the grid. But probably more importantly, all of these systems require a model of the electric distribution system to underlie their analytics. And so if you have different solutions with different versions of the model, that model maintenance and keeping those models in sync becomes a huge process nightmare. And so if you can minimize the number of models you're using, that's where the industry needs to go.
Terrific. So a couple related questions here from Brian. Do you see public cellular playing a role in smart grid deployments? And what do you think the utility perception is of that? And Joel asks, if a utility needs to act as a communication provider, why would they want to do that outside their core skill set? Why not just allow the telcos to provide the service? What's your view on that, Kevin?
So yes, I believe that public wireless public solutions absolutely have a play in the smart grid arena to fill either niche needs or broader needs for different technologies. That's a very good question on whether utilities actually want to manage their own telecommunication networks. There's a lot of providers out there outside the core, phone companies that do provide capabilities for managing networks for utilities. I think a utility needs to take ownership of the management, but they may truly outsource that to a partner that actually does the day-to-day management of the system.
And I'll ask Ron if he'd like to weigh in on that. And you certainly have a viewpoint of trying to look ahead to what your utility customers are going to want.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have to agree with Kevin there in terms of that. I think the observations I've had have been fairly consistent as well, and that's not only from a North America perspective, but also from a global perspective.